What is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, but more importantly, welcome to another edition of the Round Recap, where we sit down and reflect on the previous round of AFL action, and round 11 provided a very unique twist to the tale, a very common thread through each and every game from the weekend, and that was highlighting the fourth quarter, whether it was a team maintaining momentum and just falling over the line, whether it was a blowout. Each scoreline from every single game of football has somewhat of a dramatic shift when it comes to the final term. And I can't remember a round recently where that has been the case for every single game. So I'm very keen to dive on in and share my thoughts from round 11. It kicked off on Thursday night at GMHBA Stadium with Geelong hosting the Western Bulldogs in a game that many were touting the Bailey Smith Cup. It was the first time Bailey Smith has faced the Bulldogs as a cat, and it lived up to expectation. This was the game that I said would be game of the round. I very much believe it was. This was one of the best home and away clashes that I've seen in a very long time. And the quality of football that we saw, minus the scores, because there was some severe inaccuracy from the Bulldogs, but they've kind of hammered that point home for a very long time. This was the caliber of a finals football. This was a matchup that I think we are going to see come September again, whether it's in the grand final, whether these guys meet prior in the prelim, however it falls, that is the type of football we saw. This was a game that I honestly thought the Bulldogs were going to walk away with the win over. I just thought that collectively how they had been playing, this was going to play into their hands, especially because Geelong had just recently dropped a game at GMHBA Stadium. And from the last three outings prior to this game, the Bulldogs had beaten their opponents by 90 and 70 points, 2 out of those 3 games. So I thought with those big smackings under the belt and with a lot of momentum going their way, they could give this game a red-hot shake. But it was Geelong in the end, managing to fight off a fast-finishing Bulldogs outfit, which could have fallen either way this game, because there were some very decisive moments that have got social media talking. We'll talk about the scoreline and break that down first, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the game itself. But at quarter time, we saw the Bulldogs leading just marginally, 5 goals 4-34, leading Geelong's 5-1-31. At halftime, Geelong looked to have had everything well and truly under control. 11 goals 4-70, playing 6-9-45. At three-quarter time, Geelong had still managed to put on a very big quarter, but the Bulldogs equally as so. Only trailing by 10 points. Geelong 16-5, 101, leading the Bulldogs 13-13, 91. And then the final scoreline saw Geelong 27, 127, defeating the Bulldogs 16-17, 113. This was a game that very much had the Bulldogs sunk some shots that were very gettable. They could have won this game by a very large margin. They missed a lot of goal, especially inside the forward 50. I would have thought at least maybe 4 or 5 of those shots they had would have been converted any other day, but it just wasn't the case. And unfortunately, it's a question that I feel a lot of people have had with the Bulldogs for not only this season, but previous seasons as well. Their inaccuracy in front of goal is what stops them from being such a complete team. If they were accurate and, they had more cohesiveness when it came to moving the ball forward, they would be almost unstoppable. They could be a juggernaut of the competition. Unfortunately, that was not the case. And when we break down the misses, some of these players usually wouldn't be missing as many as they actually did. Lachie McNeil kicked 2 behinds. We're used to seeing him pop up and kick 1 or 2 goals. Tom Liberatore only kicked the 2 behinds. Jason Johannesson kicked 2 behinds. James Harms kicked 2 behinds. Riley West only managing the 1 goal but kicked a behind. Latham Vandermeer kicked 1 behind. Aaron Norton kicked 3-1. Buku Kamas kicked 1, which he should have very much gotten. Fraser kicked a behind. Cleary kicked a behind. Bontempelli only scored a behind. This is a list of players that we're usually seeing kick 1 or 2 goals a week, and just the disparity between their effectiveness in front of goal was a little bit alarming in this particular game. But the biggest thing that was spoken about over the duration of the entire weekend when it came to this game was the free kick count. And as somebody who was watching the game, I was kind of flabbergasted a little bit, because I definitely feel the Bulldogs weren't being a sloppy team in the way of coughing up free kicks. And there was a stat that I read where 13 of Geelong's 26 free kicks for the game resulted in a shot on goal. And when you kick 20 goals for the game and 13 of those shots come from a free kick, questions start to get answered, and I can see people getting frustrated because when the free kick count ends up being 26 the way of Geelong to 12 the way of the Bulldogs, you're getting more than double the free kicks. And you can argue, they're just rewarding good tackling. They're getting rewarded for being first to the ball. When you break down some of the stats from these games, Geelong had the ball more than the Bulldogs did, for starters. When you look at the tackle numbers, which I will get up temporarily if I can while I'm scrolling through and having a good old look. Tackles. Geelong laid 2 more tackles for the game than the Bulldogs did. Clearance numbers and everything else kind of really balanced themselves out. Really, the Bulldogs beat them in clearances by 9, centre clearances by 10. They lost stoppage clearance by 1. So when it comes to being first to the ball, the Bulldogs were actually first to the ball more often than not, and it was Geelong that was getting all the free kicks for it. Now, I'm not one to sit here and say that it was umpiring that gave Geelong the win, because this was as emphatic a win as I've seen in a very long time from Geelong. Shannon Neal kicks 5, Jeremy Cameron kicks 6. The link-up work from defence to forward was absolutely insane. And as I said, the Bulldogs had their moments. They kicked themselves out of this game. There was a comment on social media where somebody had questioned a headline that a news outlet had run with, saying that the football the Bulldogs played was ugly and that the football that Geelong had played was perfect. Now, they were saying that, it's disgusting to see the disparaging of one team over the other, blah, blah, blah. But when you look at the scoreline, as I said, Geelong kicking 20 goals, 7 makes it a near-perfect game because they were so accurate in front of goal. And the ugliness that they're trying to talk about with the Bulldogs is they kicked 16-17. Had they have only kicked, I still think there was 4 or 5 shots in front of that in front of goal in that forward 50 that should have been goals. They kick those, they win this by 3 or 4 goals. It's not a hard concept to wrap our heads around, but at the end of the day, as I said, the caliber of football we were watching and just the contest and the hard hittingness, it was a finals caliber game, and I feel that was ruined due to over umpiring. I'm not saying at all, again, that the umpiring swayed decision, even though some stats may suggest that. I just feel that some umpires get a little bit trigger happy and like blowing the whistle a little bit too much, and that's when we get the disparagement of the free kick count, and you get one, you get a game that's lopsided, and people are saying, oh, it's not about the free kicks that are paid, it's the ones that aren't paid, which was very much the case in this game as well. And yet still, Geelong walk away with a double effective free kick count. Now, I don't want to get too much into it because it's starting to sound like I'm hammering on about it a little bit too much, and maybe I am, but I think we're just at a point collectively as viewers and lovers of the game that the over-umpiring and over-adjudication of a match is just an absolute killer. It just takes the sting out of the game. It absolutely kills momentum, and I don't like seeing 2 teams go at it and putting on a great contest and having some dickhead with a whistle just interrupt that and just create chaos that isn't needed. That's what I'm trying to say. Feel free to sound off and let me know in the comments down below if you agree. I have a feeling most of you will. But at the end of the day, Geelong put their foot down and assert dominance in the competition. The Bulldogs still take away a lot from this game because both teams here kicked over 110 points. So it's not like we can say the Bulldogs were terrible. It's just, yet again, they fall into the trap of allowing inaccuracy to stop them from being the perfect team. As it was the continuation of Sir Doug Nicholls Round, we saw Dreamtime at the G on Friday night with Essendon taking on Richmond. As a Richmond supporter, this is one of the marquee events of the AFL year that I am most excited to get around. I spoke about it in the last round recap. I spoke about it in the tipping video for last week. I really get invested in the Dreamtime at the G spectacle. I love the Indigenous performance at the start. The welcome to country just makes a lot of sense in this realm and this kind of, platform. And just the ability to be able to recognise and appreciate and celebrate Indigenous and Aboriginal culture is such a beautiful thing. And this game, for a very long time, lived up to the hype. At three-quarter time, I still felt Richmond were well in this game. I did tip Richmond to win. In the end, it wasn't to be. Essendon skipped away with a very dominant final term. And again, it just continues what I was talking about at the start of the video. We saw in Thursday night's game, Geelong skipped away with a lead heading into three-quarter time, and then that half-time dominance where they were just able to fight the Bulldogs off. Similar to this game, it was a tight contest at three-quarter time, and Essendon just put the foot to the, pedal to the metal per se, and just ran away with it, and the young Richmond Cubs just weren't up to it, unfortunately. And it's sad because this was a very winnable game. Heading into it, I was very disgruntled that Toby Nankervis, our captain, was rested and managed. I definitely feel, given the scope of the game, and this was a very winnable game, I think Nankervis playing would have changed Richmond's favour, because he is such a physically imposing threat in Richmond's midfield. He loves to tackle, he gets clearance numbers, he can clear down the back of the pack and get intercept marks defensively. We were missing that because we played Samson Ryan, who I feel, as much as Richmond just recently re-signed him for a couple more years, I don't think he is up to AFL caliber. He really isn't. And I hate to say that. This is coming from somebody who's never played the game before, so it's easy to sit back on our couch and, retrospectively talk about a player's game, but I just feel he's not up to the level. And I feel even in the VFL, he wasn't really showing too much heading into this game either. So a little bit upsetting on that front. I can understand having to rest him because he was getting beaten and bashed. I personally feel we play him this game, and then next week when we travel to GWS, because we're going to get absolutely fucking belted by GWS, give him the rest because we're on the road, and then it heads into our bye so he can get another rest in the next couple of weeks as well. Just made sense to me. What made it worse was this game had a lot of injuries go down for both teams. We saw Zach Reid from Essendon go down with a hamstring injury. Kyle Langford earlier in the game went down with a quad injury. For Richmond, Sam Lawler, the number 1 draft pick, ended up doing his hamstring. It's been reported that he's going to miss up to 3 to 4 weeks. And Thompson Dow, I thought he was just subbed out tactically, but it turns out he was subbed out due to an injury which saw him completely shift his kneecap. His kneecap just completely shifted out of place. It's apparently an injury he's had before, but this one is going to see him miss from 8 to 10 weeks of football. It was a huge injury that I did not foresee coming. Opens up opportunity for more Cubs to come through. Mykelti Lafau has been playing through the VFL system, so he can come back in. Dion Prestia looks to be ready to come back. Tom Lynch will come back. Nankervis will come back. So Richmond will be able to rally and bring players back in. But it was such a winnable game, this game, and it was such a great contest up until three-quarter time. There were some decisions, I feel, in this game that shifted momentum. There was one that I've gotten into an argument on Twitter about where Nick Vlosten was absolutely cleaned up by Sam Durham. The ball spills out over the back. Isaac Kako gives the handball over to Nick Martin, who manages to just kick the fresh airy and put it through. Nick Vlosten gets absolutely cleaned up, no touch on the ball. It should have been a free kick for, I was going to say insufficient intent, but that's not the case. Unrealistic attempt is what it should have been. And it was play on, goal was kicked. Now, that's one goal. In isolation, that doesn't change the game, but it shifts momentum. And again, it is a decision/non-decision type of thing where umpires choose to get involved when they want to get involved, and it kind of just kills the game a little bit. That's just me. But Essendon looked great. They had a debutant in Angus Clark. He kicked 3 on debut. I thought it was one of the better debutant performances that I've seen in a very long time. Zach Merritt got into gear. Nick Martin was sensational. The Bombers have a lot to love about this. Unfortunately, impacting all of those injuries, it has been already confirmed Ben Mackay won't play this coming week either, so they're losing numbers big time. With the mid-season draft coming up, I think they're in a position where they could pick up a fair few players and they could immediately come in and make impact with this team. I definitely feel, however, even though Essendon won this game and it saw them end the night in the top 8, I can't remember whether or not the ladder itself has them in the top 8 right now, and we'll find out at the end of the video if that's the case. But I don't think they're going to play finals this year. I just feel the scope of this game and struggling to really put Richmond away when they should have, very clearly, with no Tom Lynch, no Nankervis, with the outs that we had, this should have been a game where they absolutely trampled all over the top of us, and we managed to put up a fight for 3.5 quarters. So a lot of respect to my Richmond boys in that retrospect, but I don't think Essendon are playing a brand worthy of finals football. I think they're going to fall just short. They could very well be 10th or 11th come the end of the year. Say what you will about their injury list, maybe that does come into play. I mean, they are missing some key figures when it comes to certain positions, especially their forward line. They've had to kind of makeshift that a little bit this year, similar to teams like Melbourne that, they've had to do the same over recent years. I don't know. I just think overall, Essendon are a team that have been rebuilding essentially for a couple of years, and I feel that the players that they've got, even though some of them haven't really had exposure at AFL level yet, they've still got the pieces in place where they should be making forward progression, but they seem to be one of those teams that are just there and abouts and just missing the mark. I don't know what's going on. I definitely feel Brad Scott isn't the man to take them forward. I think they need to get themselves a new coach. I think the excuses that come out of him when it comes to them losing is a little bit sensational. I definitely feel him and his team management and list management is poor, because there's players that should 100% be playing in this team over others. El Hawley's running ability on the outside is insane. I don't know how he gets omitted from this team. It just perplexes me. It blows my mind. But another win for Essendon for the Dreamtime game. I think they've now won the last 3. Nick Martin getting best on ground honours. And to wrap it up, a Rising Star nomination for Angus Clark in his debut. Big things for Essendon, but a little bit overshadowed by the injuries taken out of this game. The first of many on Saturday was at Marvel Stadium, where the Tupperware lids were ready to get thrown off, but by the end of the game, the Tupperware was well and truly put back into the cupboard, right at the back as well, so nobody could see where the bastards are. Carlton hosted GWS. This was a game that I honestly thought Carlton could get things back on their terms, and GWS, obviously, with the roller coaster year that they have had, I thought they'd struggle a little bit here. And that wasn't the case at all. It was a very tight contest early, but just like games before it, and just like the games that you were going to see progressively through this video, the quarter time, half-time kind of fight that these two teams put on was a deadlock. You could really see either of these teams getting over the line up until half-time. But after that, it was just GWS all the way. They just managed to wrestle momentum into the third quarter and then put their foot down in the last, just continuing the theme of fourth quarter dominance when it comes to this particular round. It's just, I'm very much in two minds about where these teams should be at. I've said it in recent episodes that GWS on paper have one of the best teams, if not the best team in the competition, from defense through to forward line. They are so potent in every single area. Carlton, I picked this year as my premier contenders. I thought they were going to be holding that cup aloft, because over recent years we've seen them putting the pieces together, and I felt the time was now. We are very much in a position to think that Michael Voss might not be coaching this team moving forward, because he has had ample opportunity. He has had the players at his disposal. There is no excuse for Carlton to be delivering the quality of football, or lack thereof, that they have given us in 2025, considering the 2024 year that we saw them have. Patrick Cripps, coming off of a year where he smashes the AFL record for most votes by a single player in Brownlow contention, and then this year is even far from being Carlton's best. I could probably name 2 or 3 players on Carlton's list this year that have been infinitely greater than what Patrick Cripps has been. And off the top of my head, Adam Chera, George Hewitt, Tom De Koning, I'd say those players have all been infinitely greater than what Patrick Cripps has. He's probably had 1 or 2 games where he stood out. Apart from that, he has struggled. I don't know what is happening. Nick Newman missing from defence can't be the single reason why this defence looks so sloppy and out of touch. And GWS, very similar. They just some weeks look like a shadow of their former selves, and then other weeks they rock up and rise to the occasion, and the orange tsunami is just so hard to stop from half back to half forward. As soon as this game was announced that it was Toby Green's 250th game, I should have clued on to the fact that GWS were going to rock up and do a number on these guys. They just looked absolutely impressive, led by their captain in Toby Green, who I think arguably was best on ground on the day. This helps set up GWS's season moving forward, because even though they have travelled so much, they get a lot of belief in themselves when they can win on the road, especially if they're coming to Melbourne. Marvel is not the MCG by a long shot, but still picking up a win down here is fantastic for a club like GWS. Carlton, on the other hand, there is no excuses, and I don't know how many more excuses are going to be made for these bastards until something clicks. I really don't understand. Breaking down the scoreline, at quarter time, it was GWS 5-2-32, leading Carlton 5-1-31. At halftime, it was a 10-point deficit to Carlton, with GWS leading 8-4-52 to 6-6-42. At three-quarter time, you could argue that Carlton was still in the game because we've seen them come back from deficits before. But GWS led 12-5-77 to 9-9-63, with the game ending with GWS 17-8-110, defeating Carlton 12-10-82. We had a game that saw GWS kick effectively 9 goals 4 for the second half, and Carlton only managing to muster 6 goals for themselves. I don't get it. I really don't get it. And it wasn't like it was a lack of people not rocking up. I mean, again, statistically, when you look at it, and it's been the case for GWS all year, regardless of whether they're on the winning side or the losing side, when you break down the numbers, GWS, when it comes to the top 10 performers of the game, are always dominating that kind of top echelon. Patrick Cripps actually didn't play too bad a game in this game, so I was talking about earlier how he's been very lackluster this season. This was a game where he actually performed incredibly well, and Carlton still couldn't get it done. Sam Doherty was huge in this game. Sam Walsh was huge. Adam Chera was great. Adam Sard was great off of half-back. But yet it was the efforts from Toby Green, Lockie Ash, Lockie Whitfield, Tom Green. Even Harvey Thomas had a good game. Connor Iden had a good game. Xavier O'Halloran, Harry Himmelberg. You could just rattle it off. It was a complete GWS performance from this mob. And I definitely feel amongst the teams, and there's probably 5 teams that are outside of the 8 or fighting for that position that can seize opportunity and really shake the competition up. I feel GWS are one of those teams. I definitely think Carlton are going to miss finals this year. They're just not playing a brand deserving of it, and if they make it, they'll be one of the first teams bounced out. GWS, on the other hand, if they can find some continuity in their game, they are still one of those teams that can cause an upset come September. And it's a scary thought to think that while all these other teams are performing incredibly well, Giants are flying under the radar because they've had a really rocky season, but following up in the second half of the year, they can get into gear and they can become one of the better performing teams of the comp and put a lot of teams on notice. It's just a shame to see, as a neutral supporter, teams like Carlton that are star-studded and they promise so much, deliver so little. And trust me, as a Richmond fan, I know how that feels. So, GWS emphatically getting the job done for their captain in Toby Green. Carlton, on the other hand, have a lot of disgruntled members and leaving a lot in the AFL world pondering, where the fuck do they go from here? The MCG saw Hawthorn hosting Brisbane. 2 teams, as I said, heading into this game in my tipping video that had a lot to prove, because Brisbane are going on a premiership defence. They have had some questionable outcomes happen over recent weeks, especially the draw to North Melbourne down in Tasmania. A lot of people questioning whether or not they're playing at the same level that they won their premiership under. Hawthorn, on the other hand, the Hollywood Hawks, Hawkball, whatever you want to call it, a lot of people touting this team as the premiership favourites heading into the year, but haven't really been delivering that brand of football consistently. So these are 2 teams that I feel had everything to lose and also a lot to gain as well. It was a game that was going to really set apart where these clubs are truly at. And it was Brisbane who, for the first time since 2004, defeated Hawthorn at the MCG. 2004. 21 years. It hasn't been since the era of Brisbane going through their three-peat that they have defeated Hawthorn at the MCG. That is huge, given the scope of where Brisbane's team list has been since that point in time. And we have seen different iterations of this team, but it has always had star power abundant in that lineup. This was a game, yet again, it was a tight contest up until halftime, and at halftime there was a deficit, don't get me wrong, that Brisbane ran away with. But we have seen Brisbane get complacent, we have seen Hawthorn bounce back, so I never wrote anybody out of contention at halftime. But the scoreline is broken down as such. At quarter time, it was Hawthorn leading Brisbane 3 goals 119 to Brisbane's 2-3-15. At halftime, after an arm wrestle, it was Brisbane leading 9-3-57 to 5-4-34. Now, that being said, 23 points. A lot of people would think that that was too insurmountable for Hawthorn, but again, we have seen them bounce back from bigger, and we know their best can see them bounce back. But when that then blows out to Brisbane leading at three-quarter time, 11-5-71 to 7-8-50, and then the final score being 14-9-93 to 8-12-60. After half-time, Brisbane managed to go on and kick themselves 5 goals 6. Hawthorn only managed to get the 3 goals 8. Very inaccurate, and this is a game that could have fallen either way had Hawthorn been any more accurate in front of goal. Again, a game that sees a fourth quarter deficit absolutely blow out, but another game that inaccuracy kind of costs the team, because Hawthorn, again, 33 points is insurmountable. I mean, 5 goals needed to be kicked here. Let's have a look at the stats and break down who the culprits were, because at the end of the day, Jack Gunston, he's been kicking 3, 4, 5 goals a game. He's been getting involved with goal assists. He only kicked 3 behinds. Those are normally 3 goals that Jack Gunston's going back and kicking. James Warple kicked a behind. Nick Watson only managed 1 behind. Jack Ginnivan kicked 1 goal, 1. Again, Nick Watson, we're used to popping up, seeing maybe a goal or 2. If he kicks a goal, if Jack Gunston converts his 3, if somebody like a Josh Ward or a Finn McGuinness convert their goals, if Jack Ginnivan converted his behind, Marby or Chol only scored a goal, not a goal. These are players that we normally see a lot of accuracy within the forward 50 from, and it went begging. This is a game that they well and truly could have won, but it was Brisbane that were just able to get the job done in the end, and it was the same culprits that got the job done for them. You have a look through the list, and you can see it was Dane Zorko off of half-back. It was Lockie Neal in the guts. It was Calamar Chi up forward, kicking 4 goals, the leading goal kicker for the game, and just providing something different for them in the forward 50. Charlie Curnow kicks 3. Cam Rayner kicks 2. But when you have a look at the breakdown as well, this could have been a game that Brisbane could have absolutely blown out of proportion, because Cam Rayner kicks 2 goals 2. Calamar Chi kicks 4 goals 2. He could have easily had 6. So Hawthorn, while their inaccuracy cost them potentially winning this game, Brisbane could have well and truly skipped ahead by a much bigger margin. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Beggars can't be choosers. Could have fallen on either side, really. But I think Brisbane emphatically were the better team. They just looked so well drilled around the contest. They were getting everybody involved. Calamar Chi, as I said, was just setting up a lot inside that forward 50, offering a lot of tackling pressure, putting a lot of, scoreboard pressure as well. Looking at the breakdown, he had 8 score involvements as well as his 4 goals. So he was absolutely incredible. Hugh McCluggage might not have scored a goal, but he's gotten involved with 8 score involvements as well. Just the usual suspects. As I said, Dane Zorko has 33 off of half-back, 32 from Lockie Neal in the guts. Will Ashcroft gets involved as well. McCluggage actually kicked 2 behind. So, that's another player that we're used to seeing popping up, kicking a goal every now and again. Very complete performance. I don't think there's anything negative that came out of this game at all. I'm just trying to quickly bring up the overall score stats just to make sure that there is nothing to report. I did see there were some comments being... Yeah. I was going to say, there were some comments being made about the free kick count in this game because Brisbane did win it 23-13. That being said, though, Brisbane were very dominant in every single stat around the ground. Monstered them in clearances, which is very odd for Hawthorn. Centre clearances were smashed. Stoppers clearances were smashed. Contested possessions. Uncontested possessions, Hawthorn had a lot more of. And Brisbane actually turned the ball more over than what Hawthorn did. But every single stat, Brisbane was better. This was just a game where I feel Brisbane knew heading into it exactly where they were at, what they needed to do, and they were able to get the job done. And Hawthorn, very uncharacteristically, were just doing stupid shit that we're not used to seeing Hawthorn do. And I think it was summed up with I'm going to say it was Josh Weddle. I might be wrong, but there was the perfect setup for a brilliant team goal. Strolls into forward 50, has somebody at the top of the square that he could have kicked it to. He blazes away and misses, and they cut to Sam Mitchell in the box, and Sam Mitchell is losing his fucking mind. James Sicily, in defence, looks out of sorts. He is nowhere near his best. I don't know whether Hawthorn need to start playing him potentially as a key forward, because they've now got Barras, they've now got Battle. They can build around that. I don't know. Chris Fagan, though, huge win for him, given the circumstances of how long it's been since Brisbane have won down here. And any time as a travelling team you can pick up a win at the MCG is huge, because at the end of the day, that's where the grand final's being played at. So a team like Brisbane, well within premiership contention, they take every single win at the MCG that they can, because they start building belief in themselves that they can win at this ground, and it makes their back-to-back premiership defence more viable if that does come down to it in September. Marvel Stadium saw a lot of action on Saturday, because later on Saturday night, they saw North Melbourne taking on Collingwood. And if you had told me up until three-quarter time that this game was going to only have a couple of points in it, I would have told you are fucking insane. But in retrospect, North Melbourne should have probably beaten Collingwood last year, and there was that big controversy about the 50 metre that wasn't paid or was paid. I can't remember the exact kind of circumstances, but I remember there was a lot of conjecture around that game, and North Melbourne really took it to Collingwood for three quarters. But as the theme of this week goes, Collingwood's last term performance was absolutely insane, led by none other than Nick Dacos, who in the final term himself had 17 disposals. This has caused media personnel to say that not much respect is being paid to Collingwood or to Nick Dacos at all, allowing him to get off the chain like they did, allowing Collingwood to just do what they did. I don't know what happened. I don't know what broke down. I don't know whether it is just North Melbourne being a young team, not being able to follow up and, not having those tanks built yet. But the final term blowout in this game was absolutely sensational by Collingwood. The scoreline, and you'll see how close it was leading up to that point in time. Collingwood led North Melbourne at quarter time, 2 goals 5-17 to 1-3-9. At half time, it was North Melbourne who led 6-6-42 to 4-9-33. At three-quarter time, it was a very inaccurate Collingwood who led 7 goals 17-59 to 8-8-56. For the final term, North Melbourne managed to kick only 7 points, finishing 9-9-63. Collingwood went on to kick 8 goals 1, finishing 15-18-108. The inaccuracy of Collingwood in the third term could have cost them the win here, and I was really concerned for Collingwood at that point, because I thought to myself, you've gone out, you've just kicked 8 behinds for the quarter. This game should have been dead in the water at three-quarter time. It really should have. And then to see them flip the switch in that final term, it was like the Collingwood we had seen for the first three quarters was a completely different Collingwood in the final term. Similarly with North Melbourne. North Melbourne were fighting a contested ball, they were tackling hard, and then in the final term, it was just way too easy for Collingwood. I don't understand what happened, but as I said though, performances from Collingwood individually were huge in this game. You had Jamie Elliott kick another 5 goals in All-Australian contention, 17 final term disposals for Nick Dacos, having him finish on 38 for the game. We saw a Huge performance from Ned Long. His involvement in this game was absolutely insane. He had 15 score involvements for the game. Tackle numbers, he had 14. He was absolutely sensational. I don't know how Hawthorn fumbled Ned Long and let him go to another club. Did Hawthorn delist Ned Long and Collingwood picked him up, or was it a trade? I can't remember. I think it might have been a delisting, and if it was, that is even more terrible. This really has me question where North Melbourne are at in the realm of their rebuild and how they're going, because again, this could just be a reflection of a team that just didn't have the tank to get the job done, and Collingwood, again, just scary to think for 3 quarters. You could almost think that they were just dicking around and then they put the foot down. That last quarter performance alone is enough proof to tell anybody this team is still the best in the competition, because to be so close and hard fought for 3 quarters and then go, you know what, we're done fucking around, let's get it done, and they get it done as big as they did, holy shit. There's a lot of negative conjecture coming out of this game as well, because obviously when it comes to team announcements, you have your 23, your 22, you're playing 22, and then your sub, and then you've also got 3 emergencies that you bring along with you as well. So in case before the start of the game, if one of the players you have listed to be playing needs to be pulled out, an emergency can slip in. Yet Collingwood were able to not do 1, but 2 changes outside of the emergency list that was named, and a lot of people are now questioning why they were able to do that. Now, Bobby Hill was an extremely late out for personal reasons, and I believe Scott Pendlebury was the other one that was a late out as well. And when it come to the replacements, Oleg Markov was brought in, and there was another player that was brought in as well. Here we go. So Scott Pendlebury illness was replaced in selected side by Will Parker, and Bobby Hill was replaced by Oleg Markov. I'm not sure whether going into this game if Will Parker was a emergency. I think it was Will Parker's debut in the end, I'm pretty sure. I don't think he'd played a game prior. But there's a lot of talk about why Bobby Hill was able to be replaced outside of the realm of emergencies. What's the point of having emergencies if you can then make exception to let players be selected outside of that? So definitely going to be interesting to see how the AFL handle this and what the memo is for clubs moving forward. We already know coaches like Chris Scott love to manipulate the emergencies, and late will pull out a player and throw somebody else in, and this just makes that whole fucking conundrum even worse. Braden Maynard going down with an injury early as well. I think he's expected to miss 2 to 3 weeks. I think it is, which is a huge out for Collingwood respectively, because he brings a lot of grunt to that defensive lineup. But a huge win for Collingwood nonetheless. I definitely still feel they are playing the best brand in the comp. They are, I wouldn't say miles ahead, but they're definitely establishing themselves. As I fumble and stumble, they are establishing themselves as the best team in the competition. They have done so for recent weeks, and it is hard to see at the moment anybody who can really push Collingwood to their limits and make them fold. The final game on Saturday night saw Fremantle hosting Port Adelaide at Optus Stadium. And I made a tongue-in-cheek comment last week on my tipping video saying that if Fremantle lost that game, to return to that point in time on the video because I told you so. That is only because we have seen Fremantle this year ride the wave of momentum in very weird ways. They'll win one week, and then the following week, instead of carrying on, they completely drop off. And this was set up theoretically for that to potentially happen. However, as the theme of the round continues, 3rd quarter, Fremantle skip away with a win. However, it wasn't the case, thankfully. During the 3rd quarter, Fremantle started to wrestle the momentum and skip away with a lead, and then in the final term, it was just pedal to the metal all the way, and they completely obliterated Port Adelaide in the end. At quarter time, they led Port Adelaide 3-3-21 to 3-1-19, and at halftime, they led 6-6-42 to 5-4-34. Only 8 points. Port Adelaide were very much in it, and I thought this is actually going to happen. Port Adelaide are going to roll Fremantle here. But then, Fremantle come out, 3-quarter time, 10-8-68, leading 5-6-36, with Port Adelaide only managing the 2 points in that quarter. And then in the final term, Fremantle 15-10-100, defeating Port Adelaide 7-9-51. After half-time, Port Adelaide only managed to kick 2 goals 5, whereas Fremantle went on to kick 9 goals 4. Very embarrassing to think that a team like Port Adelaide, who are always touted as being in premiership contention, and everyone talks about how good Zach Butters is and how good Connor Rosey is and how good their young list is, can only manage to scrap up 2 goals in a final half of football. Screams alarm bells for their forward half. I definitely think they were too reliant on Charlie Dixon in the past, and him obviously retiring has left a big gaping hole. Ollie Lord is going to be a player, don't get me wrong. They've got Mitch Georgiades coming through the system. They've got Todd Marshall coming through the system. They've picked up Jack Lukosius through trade. They have players there. It is just not clicking yet. And I feel the way Port Adelaide are performing this year could prompt a player like Zach Butters to actually want to leave, especially with so many Victorian clubs ready to throw draft picks and big salaries at him to bring him over here. I've seen Richmond tied and apparently all in on wanting to get Harley Reid from West Coast. I personally would rather throw my first 2-round draft picks at Port Adelaide to see if Zach Butters wants to come over. I really rate him as a player, and Port Adelaide have a lot of talent on that list. They've already got Miles Bergman linked to potentially leaving as well. They're not doing themselves any favours. And I said something again on social media this week that ruffled a few feathers, but definitely at the start of the year. Instead of coming out and saying, Ken Hinkley's in his last year this year, he's not going to be coaching next year, Josh Carr's going to take over, what should have happened was the announcement that Ken Hinkley wouldn't be coaching anymore, but instead in 2025 would be taking up a mentorship role in which he would still actively be in the coach's box and helping out on game day, but he would be supporting Josh Carr in his future endeavours to become the senior coach. That way, Josh Carr gets some experience, Ken Hinkley's able to impart that and still be involved, and the players can start getting a feel for what it's going to be like for Josh Carr to take over, because I'm telling you right now, the way Port Adelaide are going, they're going to miss finals by a country mile, and then they're going to lose Ken Hinkley at the end of the year. Josh Carr's going to come in, and it's going to throw a spanner in the works, because we don't know how Josh Carr's going to perform, and with a team like Port Adelaide underperforming as much as they are this year, they're a bottom 4 team, effectively, and that's absolutely crazy considering the amount of prelim finals these bastards have made in recent years. So the drop-off from this team has been absolutely astronomical. On the flip side of things, Fremantle finally finding to start a little bit of continuity in their game and showing that their best is amongst the best. It's just a damn shame that it's a bit too far in between when we see their best and then they drop off. Very upsetting news for Fremantle with Cooper Simpson doing his ACL. Was it his ACL? Was it his adductor joint? He's done an injury. It was very upsetting for Fremantle, however. They lose Cooper Simpson, a young kid who has been flying over the last couple of weeks, gets hit in the shoulder, absolutely dislocates it in the opening minutes of the game, and he's going to be missing up to 10 weeks of football now because of that fact. So, again, a good win, soured by an injury, but Port Adelaide, I don't know whether there's alarm bells. I don't know whether they should start waving the white flag. I just feel collectively over the last few years, Koshi has been a detriment to that club. I really do. As their CEO, as their president, I feel it's time for him to move on as well, because he has supported all the decisions that have been made, and ultimately it has led Port Adelaide to this moment in time. They could have drafted differently. They could have traded differently. They should have had a new coach a long time ago, because she's been able to just sit down and say, there's no problem here. There's no problem. All right? We're going okay. I love Ken Hinkley. I make love to him every night, and then I go and do the news the next morning. It's okay. It's not fucking okay, Koshi. Shit needs to change. Fremantle are also challenging the ban of their captain Alex Pearce. He copped a 3-match suspension for what Longmuir suggested was a footy act, and he couldn't really do much about it. But hip and shoulder, contact to the head, cops 3 weeks. I think precedence has been set this year, even if he didn't mean it, even though if he was bracing for contact. Every other person that has been sent to the tribunal this year for head-high contact has not been able to get off of their charge, and I don't think Pearce is going to be any different. I think he's going to get done. The first of Sunday, saw Adelaide hosting West Coast at Adelaide Oval. This was a game that Adelaide ran away with the game emphatically, but this game for Adelaide players needs to be put onto repeat for the rest of the season just to really inspire them to start playing this brand of football consistently, because at the 12 or 13 minute mark of the third term, Adelaide had only managed to register 54 points for the game. They went on after that point, so a quarter and a half, they managed to go from 54 to 128. They went absolutely fucking ballistic in front of goal in that final term. And it was a game that, surprisingly, again, West Coast were well and truly in the hunt up until half-time. Adelaide led West Coast 4-2-26 to 3-2-20 at quarter time. At half-time, they blew out to an 8-goal 5-53 over 5-goal 6-36 lead. But again, in retrospect, you're looking at, 17 points, so it's not too insurmountable for West Coast to wrestle back. They're starting to play some really good football, West Coast. At three-quarter time, with that little burst that they had, Adelaide led 15-12, 102 to 6-9, 45, and then in the final term, 19-14, 128, defeated the West Coast 8-14, 62. Very, very inaccurate from West Coast, but equally as inaccurate from Adelaide. This could have been absolutely huge for Adelaide, and as I said, they need to put this game on repeat for a very long time, because I've said for many years now, especially probably the last 2 to 3, Adelaide have been building a team that should be contesting for finals. This is a team that at their peak, I seriously do think Adelaide have the capabilities of being a top 4 side, and a lot of people laugh that off, but I definitely feel their best is yet to come. And from individual performances we have seen on the weekend from some young players from Adelaide, they're starting to show that I'm not wrong. Josh Rochelle kicked 5 goals straight, one of the best games I have seen him play in a very long time. Riley Thilthorpe kicks 2 goals 3, managed to pinch hit in the ruck, did some big things. Big Riley O'Brien getting old, but he absolutely dominated in the ruck. Alex Neil-Bullen as a recruit this year, flying under the radar. Ben Keys getting a job done. Isaac Rankin still showing his run and dash. You've got Luke Pedler who come in for his first game of the season. He kicks 2 goals and instantly adds to the team. James Peatling, another recruit, getting the job done with 2 goals, getting a handful of clearances, laying a few tackles. Jordan Dawson has been thrown around a bit forward this year, but he's hitting the scoreboard. He's getting people involved. Adelaide are a complete unit, and I definitely feel out of the teams that are thereabouts outside of the 8 or competing for it, Adelaide are one of those teams that can push for the top 8 come the end of the season. I don't think the top 8 is set in stone by any means. I feel the top 4 teams currently in this situation, before we get to the ladder to confirm whether I'm right or not, Collingwood, Brisbane, Geelong, and the Western Bulldogs, to me, are the top 4 teams in the competition. Outside of that, I think Adelaide and GWS can definitely push for that contention. I think Fremantle at their best can do so as well. And then after that, you can throw a blanket over a handful of teams too that are starting to wrestle some momentum back their way. But this game was absolutely huge for Adelaide. And the loss, even though it was bad enough as it is, West Coast are now sweating on a shoulder injury for Jake Waterman, and he has been the shining light for them over the last 2 years, especially when it comes to that forward line. So losing him could be detrimental to West Coast and the way they kind of function going forward, because even if he's not kicking goals, he gets his hands on absolutely everything. He gets people involved. He's going to be a huge asset to lose if that is the case. While we're on the topic of West Coast, I need to talk about this because I forgot to talk about it with Essendon, but we know earlier this year Ryan Mansell pushed a player into the contest and concussed him, and he copped 3 weeks for it, and, you know, precedent was set there. Every bastard who has pushed somebody into a contest since has gotten away with it, and I've got my own preconceived notions about that bullshit, but anyway, Jeremy McGovern is still missing football because of a similar incident. Jake Melksham pushes him into a contest, contact with the head, concussion, he still hasn't been able to come back into the game. He is now in a position where his playing future is in the hands of the AFL concussion board, because the ongoing symptoms of concussion with him could potentially cost him his career. And Similar news has come out from Essendon with young Nick Cox. His hands over, his career rather, in the hands of the same concussion board. Very upsetting to think that players now are going to be forced out of the game due to some incidents that could have been avoided. And while it's upsetting that somebody like Jeremy McGovern, he'll go down in history as one of the modern game's best defenders. He goes out a premiership player. He's had an established career, so if he was to end it now, as sad as it would be to bow out due to injury, he's had his moment in the spotlight. He goes down as one of the best defenders of the game. He goes down as one of the best Eagles to play. A player like Nick Cox that hasn't been able to really establish himself, that could be losing his career this early on, incredibly upsetting to think that that could be the case. So, close watch if you're an Essendon fan and a West Coast fan, and just in general, moving forward, if anybody does get concussion, and that's the case, we could be seeing players taken out of the game more often than not, especially on the back of what happened to Angus Brayshaw. Incredibly upsetting for both of those clubs. But, it was just not a good week for West Coast, just injuries and all that news, and then coming down to Adelaide, and then Adelaide just popping up, and this is going to give a lot of belief to this Adelaide side. Don't make any mistake of that. They're going to be putting in some serious work over the coming weeks. Speaking of teams that you could throw a blanket over that are starting to wrestle momentum back their way, Melbourne hosted Sydney at the MCG and absolutely did a number on them in the end as well. This was a game that, yet again, even though Melbourne went in with a 20-odd point lead at half-time, it was the three-quarter time deficit and then the foot pedal to the metal in the final term that just put the gap between these two. And I honestly thought, and to be quite honest with you, when you look at these teams on paper heading into this game, you would have thought Sydney actually come in as the better team, but they're just really struggling forward half of the ball with no Amadi, with no Logan McDonald, no Tom Papley. The non-existence of a forward line for Sydney is really starting to derail their season quite severely. And on the flip side, Melbourne are starting to find some continuity within a forward line that has been so haphazard for a number of years. At quarter time, this was a contest that was still well and truly up for grabs, but Melbourne led it 3-3-21 to 2-1-13. At halftime, it was Melbourne leading 6-11-47 to 4-1-25. Could have been wrestled back. 22 points, anybody's game. We've seen Sydney flip the switch, especially just coming out of the game prior to this one. At three-quarter time, it was Melbourne leading 11-15-81 to 7-3-45. Pretty much game over at that point. But for Melbourne to then put on a further 8 goals to finish 19-17-131 to 12-6-78. Sydney were a little bit fast finishing, but Melbourne just kept finding a way to keep going and going and going. And they went to a gear that I don't think we have seen in 2025 until this moment in time. This is why, talking earlier about GWS and saying the second half of the season can truly set you up, Melbourne surprisingly have now put themselves in that same position after not winning, their first 5 games of the year. They've effectively done what Sydney did a few years back. Sydney had a season where they started 0-5, 0-6, something like that, and then turned it up and made finals that year. Melbourne are now putting themselves in the position to do the exact same, and they're doing it without some key personnel out there as well, which is rather scary. But when they've got players that are starting to find some form who haven't really had that form heading into the year, they're really starting to change the fortunes of themselves. They're really starting to spin things on their head, really turn things around. And this is a Melbourne unit that looks completely different to the Melbourne that we saw for the first 6 rounds of the year. Cozzy Picker kicks 5, Melksham kicks 5, Sparrow kicks 2, Sharp kicks 2, Fritsch kicks 2. Then we've got the disposal numbers. We've got Christian Salem in the back line who gets 31. Clayton Oliver has 30 and lays 12 tackles. Ed Langdon has 30. Christian Petrarca has close to 30. Caleb Windsor has 20-odd. Keziah Pickett, as I said, kicks 5 goals, 4, and has 24 touches for the game. Xavier Lindsay still putting in 20+. Judd McVie putting in 20+. Harvey Langford had 20+. Max Gawn didn't have as big of a game as what we've used to seeing him do, but he still had a lot of impact around the ground. He laid 9 tackles as well. So Max Gawn really turning it up this year. It's been the story this season, I feel, for Melbourne, has been Max Gawn has been performing each and every week, and then everyone else has been kind of just dragging along with him. Yet the last couple of weeks, it is an emphatic team effort that has been really turning Melbourne's season around. On the flip side, as I said, for Sydney, they're just struggling forward half of the ball because they do not have the numbers down there to get the job done. Isaac Heaney, who's playing as a midfielder, kicks 3 as their main outlet to goal. They've got to play Peter Laddams up forward out of just necessity. He kicks 2 goals, so he did his job. Chad Warner kicks a goal, but you don't need him to kick a goal each and every week. You know, he's a midfielder. Just get those numbers up. Callum Mills comes back for his first game in God knows how long. He manages to kick a goal. However, facing a 1-match ban for a stupid jumping off the ground, accidentally making contact with the head. I don't know whether they'll challenge that or not, but he comes back in and then might be straight out because he's done something absolutely stupid. McLean kicks a goal. Hamlin kicks a goal, but outside of that, as I said, they are still missing Joel Amadi due to suspension. They still do not have Logan McDonald in isolation here. They brought in Taylor Adams as the sub. Didn't really have too much of an impact in the game. No Tom Papley, and we know how much he gets up and about. So I definitely feel, when it comes to the depth of Sydney, they've got plenty of midfielders that can come through. They've got some developing defenders that can come through as well. But when your forward line now has to rely on Peter Laddams and Hayden McLean, a little bit concerning, especially given the abilities that we've seen from Logan McDonald and Joel Amadi, and obviously from Tom Papley as well. So Melbourne well and truly starting to get their season back on track. Sydney, however, I don't know how long they're going to be able to keep doing this kind of thing until, I don't even know what the wait time for these players to come back is. I think Joel Amadi's back in maybe 2 weeks after his suspension, but don't know about McDonald, don't know about Papley. Once they get those players back in, watch them be a completely different team. I'm willing to back that in at this point in time. But Melbourne starting to really get things sorted out, and they might be flying come the end of the year. They could be one of those teams again that is challenging for a top 8 spot, and getting enough momentum behind them could do a little bit of damage when the time comes. The final game of the round was at Marvel Stadium, and it was an absolute snooze fest. There are so many people reporting on how terrible this game was. Ross Lyon made a comment this week about Gold Coast being the AFL's Nepo baby, and Damien Hardwick bit back in the post-presser saying that you only managed to get 13,000 here at the game, worry about yourself. This was a game that was scrappy, it was boring, I just was not interested, but the Gold Coast managed to get another win and have been the serious surprise packet, I feel, of 2025. Combine that with the fact that when you look at the run home from this point moving forward for the rest of the year fixture-wise, when you look at the softer, easier runs compared to the harder runs, the Gold Coast sit third with the third easiest run home. So I think at this point in time, the Gold Coast are looking at playing finals. And I don't know how they're going to go when it comes to playing at the MCG or places like that, but Gold Coast are a real dark horse because when it comes to finals, they're an unknown commodity, so we don't know what they're going to bring to the table when that time comes. Looking at the breakdown of this game, St Kilda were never in it. This is the only game I feel that the game was lost early and there was no coming back. But again, it was a game that was just so disinteresting to watch. If you were a St Kilda fan, I think you would have turned it off at halftime and not really given a shit. Quarter time, Gold Coast led 4-2-26 to 1-2-8. Halftime saw Gold Coast go 9-3, 57 to 4-4, 28. We then saw the 3-quarter time deficit, the Gold Coast only managing 2 points, 9-5, 59. St Kilda managing to go from 4-4 to 5-10, 40. And then Gold Coast skip out 12-8, 80 to 8-13, 61. Again, incredibly boring to watch. And this was a game that I feel we were similarly talking about it with St Kilda taking on West Coast last week. And even though St Kilda lost, it was all the St Kilda players standing up. There were a few St Kilda boys that stood up tall in this game as well, even though they lost. Like Nasiah Wanganeen-Malera, I thought was huge. Jack Steele was huge. Sinclair was huge. Mitch Owens was great. But efforts from Noah Anderson can't be overshadowed. 11 clearances. You've got Matt Rowell, who lays 15 tackles for the game. It was insane. It was absolutely insane. It was Cooper Sharman and Ben Long that kicked away with 3 goals each. Ben King only managing 2 goals. I thought he would have absolutely towed St Kilda up, but I think that just makes Callum Wilkie's job as a defender so underrated, and I feel if you were going to go to an opposition club and pluck out a defender, Callum Wilkie would be a player that I would love to pinch and take to Richmond, because his ability to shut a player down is so criminally underrated it is not funny. I don't want to really dwell on this game all too much because that's how fucking boring it was, but the Gold Coast notch up another win, and St Kilda just failing to live up to expectation again. I've been having conversations all throughout these videos with some St Kilda supporters. They've been reaching out on social media as well, and I really do feel at the end of the season, as hard as a job it might be, I think St Kilda need to really sit down and work out whether Ross Lyon is the man to take them forward. I don't think he is. I think it's time you start looking around elsewhere. After 11 rounds of football, ladies and gentlemen, this is how our ladder shapes up. In first place on 36 points, we have Collingwood, trailed by Brisbane in second on 34, and then the Gold Coast in third place on 32. We then have Adelaide, who have moved up to fourth place, Geelong, who have moved up to fifth place, Hawthorn, who have dropped down to sixth place, all equally tied on 28 points. We then have the Western Bulldogs in seventh, who have dropped down, GWS sitting in eighth, Fremantle sitting in 9th, and Essendon sitting in 10th, all tied for 7th place on 24 points. Melbourne have moved up to 11th place on 20 points, Carlton have dropped down to 12th, and Sydney have dropped down to 13th, and St Kilda have dropped down to 14th, with Port Adelaide as well, all equally on 16 points. Wow, to think that Richmond in 16th place on 12 points is only a win behind halfway through the season Carlton, Sydney, and Port Adelaide. 3 clubs that you might have thought at this point in time would have well and truly been in the top 8. That is huge. North Melbourne in 17th on 10 points, and then West Coast after their single win against St Kilda 2 weeks ago, still on the bottom of the ladder on 4 points. Business stuff is done. We can now get into the nitty-gritty. We can get into the good stuff. This is where I get to flex my own opinion. We talk about the Hip and Shoulder 2025 MVP Award and the Round 11 Team of the Week. And it was hard this week to build that Team of the Week, and this is why I love creating discussion points and opening opportunity for discussion with you guys at home. If you ever agree or disagree with anything I'm saying throughout the video when it comes to doing this stuff that I do, sound off and let me know. I would love your opinions. Let me know how your team's doing and your thoughts. Let me know how I'm doing and your thoughts. Let's just talk about it. Comments are always open. Feel free to dive on in. But we're going to kick things off with the Hip and Shoulder 2025 MVP Award. Brownlow system. Pretty simple. Best on ground gets 3 votes, then 2, then 1. At the end of the year, whoever's accumulated the most votes is who I deemed to be the AFL's MVP for the 2025 season. Might not always be the best player that has always, that's played every week. I have my own selection process when it comes to voting. So again, if you agree, if you disagree, let's talk about it. But it all kicked off Thursday night, Geelong hosting the Western Bulldogs at GMHBA. 1 vote, Jeremy Cameron. 14 disposals, 13 kicks, 1 handball, 8 marks, 2 tackles, 507 metres gained, 6 goals, and 9 score involvements. 2 votes, Max Holmes. 33 disposals, 18 kicks, 15 handballs, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 8 clearances, 512 metres gained, 1 goal, and 7 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Bailey Smith. 33 disposals, 25 kicks, 8 handballs, 4 marks, 7 tackles, 6 clearances, 812 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. Dreamtime at the G, Essendon versus Richmond. 1 vote, Sam Durham. 26 disposals, 12 kicks, 14 handballs, 4 marks, 5 tackles, 6 clearances, 476 metres gained, 1 goal, and 12 score involvements. 2 votes, Zach Merritt. 37 disposals, 22 kicks, 15 handballs, 8 marks, 7 tackles, 3 clearances, 619 metres gained, and 9 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Nick Martin. 35 disposals, 26 kicks, 9 handballs, 9 marks, 8 tackles, 6 clearances, 660 metres gained, 2 goals, and 10 score involvements. Carlton versus GWS. 1 vote, Jesse Hogan. 9 disposals, 6 kicks, 3 handballs, 4 marks, 2 tackles, 129 metres gained, 4 goals, and 8 score involvements. 2 votes, Lockie Ash. 28 disposals, 23 kicks, 5 handballs, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 1 clearance, and 699 metres gained. Best on ground, 3 votes, Toby Green. 28 disposals, 19 kicks, 9 handballs, 9 marks, 4 tackles, 6 clearances, 565 metres gained, 3 goals, and 13 score involvements. Hawthorn versus Brisbane. 1 vote, Calamar Chi. 20 disposals, 13 kicks, 7 handballs, 10 marks, 1 tackle, 317 metres gained, 4 goals, and 8 score involvements. 2 votes, Lockie Neal. 32 disposals, 20 kicks, 12 handballs, 5 marks, 5 tackles, 5 clearances, 457 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Dane Zorko. 33 disposals, 29 kicks, 4 handballs, 9 marks, 2 tackles, 2 clearances, 996 metres gained, and 6 score involvements. North Melbourne versus Collingwood. 1 vote, Jamie Elliott. 11 disposals, 9 kicks, 2 handballs, 5 marks, 5 tackles, 2 clearances, 239 metres gained, 5 goals, and 8 score involvements. 2 votes, Ned Long. 29 disposals, 8 kicks, 21 handballs, 2 marks, 14 tackles, 6 clearances, 344 metres gained, and 15 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Nick Dacos. 38 disposals, 22 kicks, 16 handballs, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, 736 metres gained, and 12 score involvements. Fremantle versus Port Adelaide. 1 vote, Murphy Reid. 18 disposals, 9 kicks, 9 handballs, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 1 clearance, 216 metres gained, 4 goals, and 6 score involvements. 2 votes, Luke Jackson. 21 disposals, 16 kicks, 5 handballs, 1 mark, 2 tackles, 38 hitouts, 8 clearances, 194 metres gained, 1 goal, and 8 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Caleb Sarong. 29 disposals, 16 kicks, 13 handballs, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 12 clearances, 483 metres gained, and 6 score involvements. Adelaide versus West Coast. 1 vote, Rory Laird. 27 disposals, 17 kicks, 10 handballs, 11 marks, 2 tackles, 272 metres gained, and 3 score involvements. 2 votes, Josh Rochelle. 16 disposals, 14 kicks, 2 handballs, 3 marks, 6 tackles, 402 metres gained, 5 goals, and 9 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Jordan Dawson. 27 disposals, 20 kicks, 7 handballs, 6 marks, 9 tackles, 8 clearances, 610 metres gained, 2 goals, and 10 score involvements. Melbourne versus Sydney. 1 vote, Christian Salem. 31 disposals, 20 kicks, 11 handballs, 11 marks, 4 tackles, 6 clearances, 402 metres gained, 1 goal, and 12 score involvements. 2 votes, Clayton Oliver. 31 disposals, 13 kicks, 18 handballs, 2 marks, 12 tackles, 3 clearances, 349 metres gained, 1 goal, and 8 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Keziah Pickett. 24 disposals, 18 kicks, 6 handballs, 4 marks, 4 tackles, 6 clearances, 536 metres gained, 5 goals, and 13 score involvements. St Kilda versus Gold Coast. 1 vote, Nasiah Wanganeen Malira, 36 disposals, 28 kicks, 8 handballs, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 2 clearances, 902 metres gained, 1 goal, and 6 score involvements. 2 votes, Matt Rowell, 24 disposals, 13 kicks, 11 handballs, 4 marks, 15 tackles, 5 clearances, 404 metres gained, and 2 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Noah Anderson, 36 disposals, 23 kicks, 13 handballs, 5 marks, 2 tackles, 11 clearances, 719 metres gained, and 6 score involvements. And after another round of voting, this is how our top 3 is currently situated for the 2025 MVP award. In third place on 15 votes, we have Gold Coast's Noah Anderson and Fremantle's Caleb Sarong. In second place, on 17 votes, we have Geelong's Bailey Smith. And in first place, on 18 votes, we have Adelaide's Jordan Dawson and Collingwood's Nick Dacos. Last but not least, it's time for the Team of the Week, Round 11. And there are some players that I really wanted to get into this team that are going to miss out, so I'm going to do some honourable mentions. I would have loved to have had young Angus Clark on debut in from Essendon. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. Noah Anderson misses this team as well after being best on ground for me for the Gold Coast Suns. It is always hard to get players into certain positions. They might get 3 votes for the MVP award, but there might be some other players collectively that have played better in that role, especially when you look over the course of the weekend. You can only select 3 starting midfielders that are going to be your centre, your ruck rover, and your rover. And I thought there were better players in that role than Noah Anderson. So again, opens up speculation and discussion points for you guys at home. Let me know if I'm getting it right. But with that being said, this is my Team of the Week for Round 11. Across the back line, I have Christian Salem and Dane Zorko in the back pockets, with Nathan Broad at full back. Across the half-back flank, I have Max Holmes and Josh Dacos, with Callum Wilkie at centre half-back. Across the middle, I have Bailey Smith and Nick Martin on the wings, with Zach Merritt in the centre. Across half-forward, I have Calamar Chi and Toby Green, with Shannon Neal at centre half-forward. Deep in my forward line, I have Keziah Pickett and Jamie Elliott in the forward pockets, and Jeremy Cameron at full forward. Luke Jackson is the ruck this week, with Nick Dacos in at ruck rover and Jordan Dawson at ruck rover. On the bench, I have Caleb Sarong, Ned Long, Clayton Oliver, and Lockie Neal. Sam Durham is my sub this week. Again, I am not choosing actual subs as the sub. I'm essentially picking a 24th man. And the coach of the round is Chris Fagan for picking up his first win at the MCG against Hawthorn in 21 years. Well, not his first win, but Brisbane's first win. I think you understand the sentiment. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. The round has been officially recapped. Thank you for joining me for another video. I do appreciate you guys turning out and supporting what I do. If you do enjoy it, hit that like button down below. And if you want to join the community we are building together, hit that subscribe button as well. I'm starting to formulate different forms of content. There are some things that have happened from social media that I've seen from like Fox Footy and stuff that are really prompting me to want to make some videos, so I'm really excited about that. But as always, if you've got ideas for content you would like to see, feel free to let me know as well. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.